Hi, second graders. Today I'll be reading the middle of the chapter called The Plan. The plan is a very long chapter, so I'm breaking it up into three parts. So yesterday I read the first part out of the three. Today I'm reading the second part. When we left off, the head of the Army and the Air Force were sort of called to head out to Giant Country. The BFG was going to lead the way. And they were going to follow behind, and they would be arriving there during the giants' afternoon nap. So while all of the giants are sleeping, they were going to tie each giant to a helicopter and hopefully carry them back that way. So they weren't going to necessarily hurt the giants. They were just going to sort of tie them up while they were sleeping and carry them back. All right, so that's right where we had left off. Okay. And just before they had all started to leave, the BFG asked the Queen if he could bring some of his dreams back with him. He said he has a whole collection of dreams and he doesn't want to leave them all behind. And the Queen said, of course. Why, of course, the Queen said, I wish you a safe journey. So here's the picture of all of the helicopters, or as the BFG calls them, belly poppers, heading out. And remember, there is one helicopter for each giant. The giants can't fit inside the helicopter, so 9 helicopters are going out, and each one will hopefully carry back a giant. The BFG had made thousands of journeys to and from Giant Country over the years, but he had never in his life made one quite like this, with 9 huge helicopters roaring along just over his head. He had never before traveled in broad daylight either. He hadn't dared to. But this was different. Now he was doing it for the Queen of England herself, and he was frightened of nobody. As he galloped across the British Isles to the helicopters thundering above him, people stood and gaped and wondered what on earth was going on. They had never seen the likes of this before, and they never would again. Every now and then, the pilots of the helicopters would catch a glimpse of a small girl wearing glasses, crouching in the giant's right ear and waving to them. They always waved back. The pilots marveled at the giant's speed and at the way he leaped across the wide rivers and over huge houses, but they hadn't seen anything yet. Be careful to hang on tight, the BFG said. We is going fast as a fizzlecrump. The BFG changed into his famous top gear, and all at once he began to fly forward as though there were springs in his legs and rockets in his toes. He went skimming over the earth like some magical hop, skip, and jumper, with his feet hardly ever touching the ground. As usual, Sophie had to crouch low in the crevice of his ear to save herself from being swept clean away. The 9 pilots in their helicopters suddenly realized that they were being left behind. So remember how the BFG travels in that high-speed gear. So he's going so fast that the helicopters may have trouble keeping up. The giant was streaking ahead. They opened their throttles to full speed, and even then they were only just able to keep up. In the leading machine, the head of the Air Force was sitting beside the pilot. He had a world atlas on his knees, and he kept staring first at the atlas, then at the ground below, trying to figure out where they were going. So an atlas is something that there may be one in our school library. Maybe when we go back to school, we can check with Miss Bain and see if she has an atlas in there somewhere. But an atlas is just a huge giant map. And there can be atlases for different places or different, parts of the world, and you can open them up and they're just, huge giant maps. You would take them maybe if you were traveling somewhere. People don't use atlases as much anymore because there's maps, on computers and on cell phones now and GPS and all of that. But back before all of that existed, if you had to go somewhere and you didn't know how to get there, you would look at a map to help you get there. So that's what they're doing. They have this giant atlas or giant map in the helicopter. Frantically, he turned the pages of the atlas. Where the devil are we going? He cried. I haven't the foggiest idea, the pilot answered. The Queen's orders were to follow the giant, and that's exactly what I'm doing. The pilot was a young Air Force officer with a bushy mustache. He was very proud of his mustache. He was also quite fearless, and he loved adventure. He thought this was a super adventure. It's fun to go new places, he said. New places? Shouted the head of the Air Force. What do you mean, new places? This place we're flying over now isn't in the atlas, is it? The pilot said, grinning. So here they are. Here he is holding the atlas. So they're kind of realizing this place that they're going, Giant Country, isn't actually on a map. If you kind of think about it for a minute, if it was on a map or on an atlas somewhere that humans could see, then they would wonder, what's there? Why don't we go there? Are there really giants there? Let's go travel and see. So it's a place that humans don't really know about. You're right, it isn't. It isn't in the atlas, cried the head of the Air Force. We've flown clear off the last page. So they're kind of tracking where they are from the map, and the map corner page ends. And he's saying, there's sort of like nothing there. They're still traveling, but there's nothing on the map. I expect that old giant knows where he's going, the young pilot said. He's leading us to disaster, cried the head of the Air Force. He was shaking with fear. In the seat behind him sat the head of the army, who was even more terrified. You don't mean to tell me we've gone right off the atlas, he cried, leaning forward to look. That's exactly what I am telling you, cried the Air Force man. Look for yourself. Here's the very last map in the whole atlas. We went off that over an hour ago. So, if you're looking at a map, and when your actual map ends, of course, the actual world or Earth doesn't end there. You can keep walking or you can keep driving. That's just what the map goes up to. But they're saying they've gone sort of off the edge of the map. Okay. We went off that over an hour ago. He turned the page. As in all atlases, there were 2 completely blank pages at the very end. So now we must be somewhere here, he said, pointing a finger on one of the blank pages. Where's here? Cried the head of the army. The young pilot was grinning broadly. He said to them, That's why you always put 2 blank pages at the back of the atlas. They're for new countries. You're meant to fill them in yourself, which of course isn't really true. Sort of like during our reading group time, sometimes there'll be a book and some of you guys will flip to the end and say, why are all these blank pages at the end? And I say, I don't know, they're just there. Okay. The head of the Air Force glanced down at the ground below. Just look at this godforsaken desert, he cried. All the trees are dead, and all the rocks are blue. The giant has stopped, the young pilot said. He's waving us down. The pilots throttled back the engines, and all 9 helicopters landed safely on the great yellow wasteland. Then each of them lowered a ramp from its belly. So the helicopters, all 9 have all landed, and then like a ramp went down in the middle. 9 jeeps, one from each helicopter, were driven down the ramps. Each jeep contained 6 soldiers and a vast quantity of thick ropes and heavy chains to capture the giants with. I don't see any giants, the head of the army said. The giants is all just over out of sight there, the BFG told him. But if you was taking these slosh-blinking, noisy belly poppers any closer, all the giants is waking up at once, and then pop goes the weasel. So you want us to proceed by jeep? The head of the army said. Yes, the BFG said. But you must all be very, very hushy quiet. No roaring of motors, no shouting, no mucking about, no piggery-jokery. The BFG, with Sophie still in his ear, trotted forward, and the jeeps followed close behind. Suddenly, the most dreadful rumbling noise was heard by everyone. The head of the army went pea-green in the face. Those are guns, he cried. There is a battle raging somewhere up ahead of us. Turn back, the lot of you. Let's get out of here. So he thinks he's hearing guns coming from the giants. Pig spiffle, the BFG said. Those noises is not guns. Of course they're guns, shouted the head of the army. I'm a military man, and I know a gun when I hear one. Turn back. Those is just the giants snortling in their sleep, the BFG said. I is a giant myself, and I know a giant snortle when I is hearing one. So he is saying like that sound as they're snoring. Are you quite sure? The army man asked anxiously. Positive, the BFG said. Proceed cautiously, the army man ordered. They all moved on. Then they saw them. Even at a distance, they were enough to scare the daylights out of the soldiers. But when they got close and saw what the giants really looked like, they began to sweat with fear. 9 fearsome, ugly, half naked, 50 feet tall, 50 feet long brutes lay sprawled over the ground in various grotesque attitudes of sleep, and the sound of their snortling was indeed like gunfire in a battle. The BFG raised a hand. The jeeps all stopped. The soldiers got out. What happens if one of them wakes up? Whispered the head of the army, his knees knocking together with fear. If any one of them is waking up, he will gobble you down before you can say knackjife, the BFG answered, grinning hugely. Me is the only one that won't be gobbled up because giants is never eating giants. Me and Sophie is the only safe ones because I is hiding her if that happens. The head of the army took several paces to the rear. So did the head of the Air Force. They climbed rather quickly back into the jeep, ready to make a fast getaway if necessary. Go forward, men, the head of the army said. Go forward and do your duty bravely. The soldiers crept forward with their ropes and chains, all of them trembling mightily. So they're very scared and nervous. They have all their gear and equipment, but they're really scared. As the BFG just said, if any of them were to wake up, one of the giants would just eat one of those men up right away. No one dared speak a word. The BFG, with Sophie now sitting on the palm of his hand, stood nearby to watch the operation. All right, so I think we'll stop here. Here is a picture of what's going on. So you can see all of the giants. They're all luckily asleep. They're all just kind of laying about on the ground, how they always do. And here's the BFG, and here are you can just kind of see a couple of the jeeps in the picture, but of course there's 9 of them. Each one of them has 6 soldiers inside. So tomorrow I'll finish this chapter and we'll see what happens. Hopefully the soldiers can get these giants all tied up and attached to the helicopters and head back. If any of them wake up, though, that's not going to be good. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. Bye.